Isabel asked me to do this today, I thought, well, you know, what can I do? And I thought, well, Christmas is coming up pretty soon and everybody's looking for Christmas presents or whatever. And it's always better to start thinking about Christmas in July rather than end of November. So I figured I'd do a couple Christmas things. One is a gnome and the other one's a little snowman. They're kind of fun to make. They're easy to make. It's not a big deal. The hardest part is cutting out the beard on this guy and maybe the hat on this one, but the rest of it's pretty much easy spindle turning. What I like to use is old wood that I found out in the woods, something preferably that's not wet. I try to cut down trees that have been down for quite a while or limbs or something so that they're fairly dry. I prefer ash when I do this because I like the texture and the color and so forth on it, but sometimes you pretty much got to get what you get. Those are just some of my preferences. So let's get started. So what I did is I got some wood from the woods. This piece that I've got here is maple. Like I said, sometimes you got to get what you get. What I use is something about, well, let's start with this one first. Something about, 2.5 inches or so in diameter, maybe about 9 inches long. We're going to start on the gnome next or first and get that one done. So that's pretty much what you got to have. I like to leave a little bit of bark on it when I can, but sometimes you don't have that option. It decides to come off and wood does what it wants to do. For the headstock portion, I like this steb center rather than the four-prong center. It just seems to hold better for me and I can get things put back where they belong easier and they bite in really well. Their regular steb centers are fairly expensive, but PSI has some knockoffs that they've done that are almost as good. So they're within everybody's price range, but that's just me and you can guys do whatever you want. So I mount these between centers. I just kind of guess at where the center's at because it doesn't have to be perfectly centered. Make sure that bites in pretty good. Now with wood that has this bark on it, I always start off with at least with a face shield on because you never know when it's going to come off and what direction it's going to go in. So I prefer to make sure I don't get hit in the face. Start turning this around with a small roughing gouge. It seems to work the best to get the stuff off. I guess a bowl gouge would work as well as anything. So what we're going to do is just kind of get it started around. Now this end up here on the right-hand side, my right-hand side, your left, wants to be about 1 3/8 inches in diameter. So you start cutting a just kind of work your way back, taking a little bit more off each time. Like spaghetti. Now, the reason the top has to be about 1 3/8 inches or so is that when we make the hat for this thing, we want to drill a hole in the hat that will cover the top end of the hair that goes around it. Sometimes you don't get the hair on exactly right, and sometimes you don't get the hair on just right, so you need the little bit extra to cover it up. And you want kind of like a little cove, maybe, I guess you could say, in here. All right, now, at this point, I would probably go around and sand it. I power sand everything as much as I can because it doesn't take as long to do it, and it does a good enough job. These things don't have to be perfect. They're not furniture. They're made to be a little bit on the rustic side, so I don't worry too much about getting all the little dings and stuff out of it. Just do what I can do. Now, to hold the hat on, we need some kind of a mechanical bond in there, or some kind of a glue joint. End grain to end grain doesn't work real well. So what I do is I put a small tenon on the end of the shaft, and then that's glued into the top of the bottom of the hat, and it seems to work pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put put this down. About a quarter to an eighth of an inch. I'm sorry, a quarter to 3/8 of an inch. Now, normally the ends of these centers, these live centers, are about a 1/2 inch. So I get somewhere close to that. And then I found the easiest way to check those is with one of these drill gauges. This is a metal one, it seems to work better. And what I do is I just pull this back and just put this over the end of it. And that's going to have to go pretty much right down to the end of that center. That's kind of a critical dimension because it's got to fit in the hole. But at the same time, you don't want to mess up your center. And make sure it's undercut a little bit. I think what we're going to do is do the back side a little bit too before that gets too thin. So on the back side, on the bottom, of course, you got to make sure it's a little bit undercut so it'll sit on the bench properly, on the table right. I like to just put a little rounded over V groove in there. Something like that. Good enough. So once it goes over the top of that, you know you've got a decent tenon that's going to fit in the hole. Oh, the one thing nice about this metal drill gauge is that if you're close, it'll start leaving a little shoulder, and that way you know you've got to turn down that little shoulder so that you've got an accurate measurement. So that's pretty much the way that the bottom part of the gnome is taken care of. Like I said, I would sand this, but I don't think anybody wants to watch me sand on this today, so I'm not going to bother doing it unless you want me to. So that basically is the bottom part of the gnome. All right, now to make the hat, I've got a piece of poplar here. You can use whatever you want on this. Normally, I always paint these, so I usually go for the cheapest thing that I've got, and that's normally poplar. This is about, probably 1.5 inches, 1 5/8 in diameter, and probably 4 inches long. You can make it whatever length you want, whatever design that you decide that you want to go for. So I rounded this off and I put a tenon on the end of it to fit in my chuck. And I like to put the tenon in there loosely so it's not snug down. Bring the tailstock up, line it up so that it's straight and true, and then tighten it down after that. And that's running pretty good. All right, the first thing that we want to do is drill a hole in here. And I'm going to drill an 1.5 inch hole. About 1/4 inch or so deep. All we want to do is have enough to cover up the fur on the top of the base. That's all it is just to cover that up, because I've never really gotten them perfect. So turn that down a little bit. Wrong way. I always like to make sure I hold this when I'm drilling so it doesn't turn in there. That's good. Take this one out, maybe. And I've got a 1/2 inch drill bit that will drill down for the tenon. And that's only got to go in just the length of the tenon, actually, maybe a little bit more, so it doesn't have to be all that deep. That should be more than enough. Yep. To keep things as much as possible between centers. All right, now we'll start off with maybe a little bit of a bead here. And like I said, you can make it however you want. There's a couple of Facebook groups that are devoted to these gnomes that you can get some inspiration from. One of them is It's All Tina's Fault. She does mainly the small ones, but you can still get some ideas about the big ones. Just going to get rid of some of this excess material so that the bead stands a little proud. And then you can start doing whatever you want to do. What happened there was I tried to enter the wood with the flute up. You got to have it perpendicular to the thing and all the way closed in order to keep it from running. And then you can open it up. And then we'll put a little ball on the end of that. And we want to get this down as far as we can without parting it off, because if it breaks off, it's going to go flying. That's about as far as I want to get. And like I said, you can do whatever you want as far as a pattern on this goes. Of course, at this point, you sand it off. Need a little sandpaper. Now, normally what I would do would cut this off with a knife, but I don't know if mine's sharp enough to do that. I usually bring a utility knife with me, but the only problem with it, when it tears like that, it leaves a hole. But then what I would do is just take and sand that. I found that these discs like this will sand that off pretty easy. Again, sand this off down at the bottom a little bit, and then, oops, that'll fit in the top there like that, and you can glue that on. And there's enough room for the fur to fit up in there. Now the fur is held on with hot glue. There's some stuff called Fabri-Tac or something like that that is supposed to work pretty good. I've had good luck with this stuff, so I don't bother with it. But I hear it's good. Grand Fabric sells all this fake fur that they have in just bundles of it. This stuff with the silver in it, I kind of like it because it has a little bit of shimmer to it, I guess you could say, and it makes the gnomes look good. So that's the one I prefer. They've got all kinds of stuff, ranging from gray to all different colors. Some that even looks like sheep's wool. But I've been kind of gravitating toward that as much as anything else. Now, when you cut this to fit the gnome, basically it's kind of like a T at the top and inverted down to the bottom. The top is about 6 inches in length, and then I've got a couple little ears that are sticking out the side, and then it tapers down towards the bottom to actually make the beard. What I found with this stuff is if you take and cut it with a pair of scissors, you're going to cut all the danglies off, and then it's not any good. So what I do is I use a sharp X-Acto knife. So let's say I want to come down like this. And I'm going to have to come up a little bit further because I've already cut that off with a pair of scissors. So what you've got to do is just kind of cut through the cloth. And you can see how the bottom here is there's no danglies on it. And there's always going to be a few pieces of fabric that aren't going to come off. And then once you get that done, you can see that there's the danglies are hanging down the bottom there now, and that'll make a good beard, rather than just cutting it off with a pair of scissors. So the next thing we've got to do is kind of put this on here and see how much we need to cut off. Kind of start in the middle. And get it overlapped. See where it's got to be cut. These you can cut with a pair of scissors if it's a little straight. Sometimes you need a couple hands. And that's going to work out pretty good. All right, now the next thing you got to figure out is what side you want out. And I like to look and see which has kind of, well, it doesn't matter which side is out because you're going to be covered up. So what I do is I pick the crummiest side, and that's going to be the one that's parts that's going to be covered up with the beard. Of course, before I do this, I've got it all sanded up. I put a coat of oil on it because I like the way the oil darkens up the wood. And then I usually spray it with several coats of some kind of spray lacquer, Deft or something like that. All right, be careful when you're using this heat gun or glue gun because it'll burn your fingers if you're not careful. So just put a shot on that. Little shot next to it. And close up the back. Now I also like to put just a little dab underneath the beard so that it can't be pulled up. So now this will cover up the hair and make it look a little bit more finished at the top. Okay, so that'll give you an idea what that does. Now I've got this chuck with these pin jaws or whatever they're called on them. I found that holds this piece of half-inch dowel that I used to make the nose for the project. And actually what I should have done is put that got the hole drilled for the nose on it before I glued the beard on. So I like to use the Badan tool to cut the tenon on this. It's just a 3/8 Badan tool that I've got ground off and sharpened up. It's basically like a parting tool, only a little bit wider. So what I'm going to do is come up here about a 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to come down here. So it's about 3/16. 1/4 inch always will work as well. But I've got a 3/16 drill bit with me. So I'm going to check with the drill gauge. And I'm almost there. All right. Now, the drill gauge made that little shoulder on there. So I know I need to go down to that point for the rest of it. This method is kind of foolproof because you can kind of sneak up onto your tenon. And when you're done, it's the right diameter to fit in the hole. And a little chamfer on the end, and that part should be done. All right, now, the next thing we need to do is make the nose. So what I'm going to do is just start making a nose, just a sphere. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, just somewhere close. A little piece of sandpaper. And then part it off. And then sand the little marks out of it that might be in there. And that's all there is to it. I should have drilled the hole for the nose before I glued the beard on, but I forgot. All right, the gouge that I use for a lot of that little tiny stuff is just a gouge that kind of evolved into that grind. It does a really nice job on getting up close to things, shoulders and things like that that are tiny. And I use it a lot. Normally what I do is I make a little slit in there for the nose to go through, drill the hole, and then put the fur on. But the drill bit's getting tangled up in the fur and I can't get through it. So we'll just have to leave it go at that. All right, the last thing that we need to do on this is to clean off the bottom, that little nub that's on there. And what I like to use is just a Dremel tool with a flexible shaft. And the bit that's in there is one of those triangular cutters that a lot of carvers use. It does a pretty good job of getting rid of that nub on the bottom. These things come in, I think, 3 different sizes. And off the top of my head, I can't remember the company that does it. But if anybody's interested in it, I'll look it up. And what you want to do is get it down so that it doesn't interfere with it sitting on the table. Now, when I paint these noses, I just have a block of wood that I've got some holes drilled in, and I just shoot them with the paint thing. I found that Rust-Oleum lacquer works good. It dries quickly, it covers nicely, and it doesn't have a real shine to it. I don't like them real shiny when I do it, but this works pretty good rather than trying to hold it. Still, I would put a glove on this hand because you're going to get some overspray, and it does make it kind of hard to get off. The piece that I got for the snowman has some cracks in it, and this is from the same log that I got the one for the gnome. I don't think this is going to be too bad. It's something you just have to deal with. If it looks too bad, don't use it. And the drier it is, the better it is. So this is still a little bit on the wet side. When I was turning, you can see the spaghetti that I got off of it. Tells you it's still a little bit on the damp side, but it it works. And like I said, these are supposed to be a little bit on the rustic side anyway. So unless it's a safety factor, I wouldn't even worry about it. Snowmen aren't perfect. The snowman consists of several different parts. Of course, you've got the mandatory plaid scarf on there. You've got the black buttons on there. Buttons you can buy in big bags if you end up doing a lot of these, or you can just go someplace and get a card full where there's 5 or 6 on there. Try to pick the buttons to go with the size of your snowman so they don't look a little bit too out of whack, but it doesn't really make all that much difference, I don't think, as long as they're not 2 inches in diameter for something this size. Of course, you've got sticks for arms, and then you've got a hat, and then of course you got to have the carrot nose on there as well. The carrot nose is made the same way as the noses for the gnomes. The only thing different is I taper them out to a point. Small skew works best for this. And then I use some aniline dyes to dye it orange. You can go around and put some cuts in it to make it look more like a carrot, but I don't think anybody's gonna look at it all that close. We've got a hat. Now the hats you can make any way you want. There's a woman on Facebook that does a really, really nice job with these. Her name's Holly Denny. Anybody's on Facebook, you can look her up, but she does some really, really nice snowmen, although I haven't seen any for a while. The other thing you can look at is, remember Calvin and Hobbes, the old comic strip? Well, he used to do a lot of snowmen stuff on there, and some of the expressions that he gets are really pretty good. So if you're looking for something, inspiration on that, try either Holly's website or Holly's Facebook page, or look up the Calvin and Hobbes and just kind of go through it until you can find out what you want. But other than that, there's not a whole lot to making these. The bottom part is done pretty much the same way as the base of the gnome. The only thing, it's a little bit rounded over. What we need is a piece of, well, for this particular snowman, like I said, you can make them any size that you want. It doesn't really matter what size you make them. It's whatever you want. Of course, the larger they are, the longer it takes. So we're going to start these off between centers like we did the last time. I like to start off with a piece of wood about 3 inches in diameter, but sometimes you got to get what you can get. This is a little bit bigger than what I like. What I've done is I've set my calipers for the shoulders on that snowman, and we'll round this down to that dimension. Again, it's got some bark on it, so I want to start off with a face shield. See how it's flying off. All right. If anybody's interested, this particular one is about 2 7/8, give or take. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. And it doesn't have to be at that exact dimension either. One knot right in the middle. All right, those cracks that were in there don't seem to be too bad. Now we must have cut most of them off. The top is about, on this particular one, is about 2 3/8. And I'm going to go down a little over, oh, probably 2 5/8, I guess, just so I have enough room to clean up the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here the 2 3/8. And get rid of the waste material first. By getting rid of the waste material, you don't have to turn through it. A lot of, especially beginning turners, try to turn through the waste to get to the shape they want. And it just makes it all that much harder. So if you get this down to where it's kind of blocked out, it makes things a lot easier, at least I think so. So the first thing we're going to do is turn this shoulder. And then we're going to start to make a sphere. And like I said on the gnome, it doesn't have to be perfect. So about like that. And then I like to take and turn the bottom down like a waist, I guess you could say. Oops. And then clean it up a little bit. That's pretty good. I pretty much power sand everything as much as I can. Makes it a lot quicker. And turn your speed down a little bit. It also gets rid of a multitude of sins. I usually start off with 120. And it's like a 120 gouge. It gets rid of some of the high spots and the lumps and bumps that might be in there. The only problem with this wet wood tends to clog it a little bit. I usually don't go anything beyond 150 on these. And I probably should sand a little bit more, but you get the idea. Now, just like with the gnome, we've got to part it off a little bit. And on this one, it doesn't really matter if you break it off or not, because we're going to sand it a little bit. And that's kind of what we're looking for. And again, on those, I go over with a coat of linseed oil or Watco or something like that, and then give it 2 or 3 coats of spray deft, rubbing it down with steel wool in between each one. And that seems to be okay. Now, through the magic of pre-planning, I've got one done here that we can do the rest of it on. So first thing we need to do is drill a hole for the nose. First thing we need to do is figure out where the front's going to be. Obviously, that crack I wanted in the back, so we'll say about right there. That's got that orange or that stain in the front. So I like to put a mark with an awl when I start to drill a hole in this, because sometimes the wood will wander, or the drill bit will wander, and we don't want that to happen. The next thing we need to do is get things painted up. Walmart has these paint pens, and it's supposedly actual acrylic paint. Comes in different colors. Obviously, I wanted black and white, white for the eyeballs and black for everything else. It says to shake it up real good. And this acrylic paint tends to dry pretty quick. Well, I guess what you got to do The other one I had wasn't as bad. You got to kind of pump this a little bit back and forth to get it to start putting paint out. I'm not real good about with paint. So we just have to get what we get. We'll find some. Now, I don't know how long this stuff takes to dry. This seems to be still a little bit on the wet side. So we'll work on the buttons. Like I said, you can buy them in cards of 6 or 8. Walmart's got them. Joann Fabric, any of those places you can get buttons at, or you can steal them off an old shirt or something like that. Like I said, kind of match the button to the size of your snowman. I usually put these things on with little small nails. They don't have to be all that long. These were the shortest ones I had with heads on them. So I brought those. All right, so what I kind of like to do is put them in a straight line, although you can do whatever you want. That'll be 1. That'll be 2. And that'll be 3. Now, the hardest part on this is for anyone who's got fat fingers like me. It's hard to get the nails to cooperate. Nope, that wouldn't work. That's a bigger hole. There we go. And then I get them down so that they're almost in. And then I use a nail set. To get them down the rest of the way. All right, so once I get the nail in, I want to cover up that head. So I just take the black pen and go over the head of the nail, and that seems to work pretty good. That seems to be dry enough. All right, so next thing to do is to go around the eyes. Make a mouth. And then some eyelashes, or eyebrows rather. You can make a unibrow if you want. But that's basically the idea of putting the face on. All right. Now, the next thing to do is make the hat. Like I said, the hats you can make any size that you want. What I have is a piece of cherry here that I dried. I was making a lot of rolling pins, and fine rolling pin banks are rather expensive. So what I found when I'm doing bowl blanks and stuff, I save the scrap that are big enough to turn into rolling pin blanks, and I turn them around, cut them off, turn them around, cover them up with anchor seal, and then date them and so forth on the back. This one was done in 16, so it's more than dry enough, and it's a cheap, quick, easy way to get large-sized spindle blanks without having to pay big bucks for them, and it works out really good. On that particular batch, I probably had 25 of different species of wood: cherry, maple, walnut, ash, and looking through the pile, I only lost 2 pieces of probably, oh heck, probably 25 blanks. And the ones that I lost were ones that had knots in them. And they tended to split right where the knot was. But it's, like I said, it's a cheap, easy way to get turning spindle blanks that don't really cost a whole lot, except some time. So I got a piece of wood that's about 3 inches in diameter and about 4 or 5 inches long. And I'm going to turn it down to make the hat. All right, so we're going to take this one down to about 2 3/4, give or take. Now, of course, these are going to warp when they're drying, so you've got to kind of allow for that. I just guessed at where the centers were at with a all right, that's round. All right, round enough. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and make the hat about that long. And I want to put a tenon on it, just like I did with the top of the gnome, because that's what's going to hold the hat onto the snowman. But I'm not going to fiddle around like I did with the other one to get it perfect. You all got the idea of what we want to do. All right, so we want to make sure that the bottom of the hat is clean, because part of it is going to show. So you're going to want this fairly clean there, so you don't have to sand a lot. Again, to get it so it doesn't roll on you, put the bevel in so the bevel is perpendicular to the workpiece. Oops. Get it in a little bit and then open it up and clean it off. And that's fairly clean. We can sand what little bit we need to sand on that. All right, so the next thing we need to do is make the bottom for the hat. Like I said, you can do this however you want. We'll just say the hat's going to be about, the brim on it's going to be about like that. That's good there. Clean this up a little bit. I still got a little bit of tear out. All right, so the next thing we need to do is start forming the hat shape. You can make kind of a Mad Hatter shape. I want a hat band on that a little bit. Proud of the rest of it. I slipped there and got a little bit on that hat band. That's good. All right, then the last thing that we need to do I like to put a little chamfer on both ends, because if they get bumped, they tend to break or chip off. There. All right, now the last thing we have to do is part that off. That's good. All right, so at least that's the general idea with the hat. Of course, you're going to come back and sand everything and make sure the tenon fits in the hole. And what I usually do is nip that off with a bandsaw close to the surface, and then I use the sanding disc to sand them off so they're flat. What I do on these dome things here is once I get them flat with the flat disc, I put a foam pad on it and go over it again. It seems to do a lot better job getting things squared away. All right, the last thing we need to do is sand a flat on this so the hat can sit on it. You can make them straight up and down. I kind of like them at a kind of an angle and tip back. Probably better if we'd have sanded this off before we did the face, but you get the idea. All right, so I've sanded a small flat on that. And what I'm going to do next is I've got one of these center finders. And I'm just going to draw some lines on here. Just to get an idea of where the center point is. I've got a small brad point drill, and I'm just going to take and drill a hole in it, and then that tenon should fit down in the hole. Any questions on the snowman?